Hello and welcome to the channel. I am the Mad Computer Scientist. Before we begin, I would like you to do me a favor if you're new here. Be sure to hit that like button. If you haven't done so yet, hit the subscribe button. Say hi to Athena, who is crawling up my leg. And remember, if you find this content useful or if you have ideas for any future content, please remember to leave a comment below. This is Faulty Logic Fridays. Normally on this channel, I cover math, computer science, and tech topics that are of interest to me. On Faulty Logic Fridays, we do something a little different, where we try to take a look at people we think have incorrect logic. Now, tonight I am going to the absolute bottom of the barrel when it comes to logic, and I decided to take a look at Hans Wormhat. Now, if you know my profession, you're probably going to guess why I chose this particular video, but he asked tonight, are teachers okay? I'm also going to speed this up a little bit because Hans Wormhat speaks slowly, and this is a rambling stream of consciousness video, and it's a little hard to follow in places. Now we're going to share the screen here. At least I think we are. The cat's in the way, so I can't see, because cats do things like that. But give me a second, and hopefully the sound will work the way I want it to. All right, there we go. Okay, let's see if we actually have sound, like I think we should.
Today's video, I'm just going to show some...
Okay, this is good. A result where we try to take a look at people we think have incorrect logic. Now, tonight I am going to the absolute bottom of the barrel when it comes to logic, and I decided to take a look at Hans Wormhat. Now, if you know my profession, you're probably going to guess why I chose this particular video, but he asked tonight, are teachers... Okay, sounds like we don't have sound on the video, which means we have to reshare and do it again. Give me a second. Now, tonight I am going to the... Get closer to the end, maybe that sounds like we don't have sound. Okay, go back a little bit and see if we have sound. Okay, sounds like we don't... A little bit further. Okay, we do not have sound, so we need to reshare. Okay. Sorry, the beginning of these streams are usually tech checks, so... And I started a little late because I was playing a game called Nightingale, which is a steampunk crafting game. Hello, Hive Science. I know you have a premiere right now. I typically do my Faulty Logic Fridays at 9 p.m. on Friday nights. Although, given some other things that are going on in my life, I was tempted to take tonight off. So hopefully we've got this right now, and we should have sound shared. Give me a second here and let me know if you hear anything.
Reddit thread that was talking...
Okay, well, of course I can hear things, but I can also tell there's another issue, which, if the cat would move, would be easier to fix. Athena, I love you, but you're in the way. Okay, there we go. Sound should be coming through my headphones now, which will make things a little bit better. So let's get into it. Now, if you were familiar with Hans Wormhat, you probably know he's famous for declaring animals fake just because he looks at them and decides they're fake. I think he might have taken a little turn here because it looks like he's looking at Reddit, the source of all information in the universe, and he's looking at a teacher's thread. Oh, hello, David Hodge, if I forgot that as well. Funnily enough, Mr. Wormhat, I happen to think the same thing every time someone covers one of your videos, that they are showing the clown freak show. Is that because, as far as we can tell, nothing your teachers ever told you took? Mr. Wormhat, I guarantee you that there are plenty of things that have been added to a curriculum. In fact, in this state, there's actually a requirement that high school students will have to take at least one computer science credit to graduate. They have to learn some basic coding. I do not know if that's true. I think that's dependent on the state, but yes, a lot of schools have canceled driver's ed. I have no idea what you mean by a BAFO, but do you mean the schools are spending money on technology the students will have to use in the future? And here's the thing, that's actually an interesting and good question to ask. Are you actually going to address it, Hans Wormhat, or are you going to go off in a completely different and not quite as insane as your videos usually are direction? I'm sorry, Mr. Wormhat, but claims like you went to school just force me to say citation needed. You, Mr. Koalas are fake, worked for a university. Now, personally, I don't believe that you believe anything you put out on the internet, but I don't believe that if you are serious, that you ever worked for a university. Even adjunct professors, who are treated as badly as you are saying, as far as I know, are held to higher standards than you apparently hold yourself to. Oh, for yes, yes, you are. I don't know why it's still doing that. Give me a second. This is always a problem with streams, and I thought I had fixed it. All right, let me know if it's actually showing now.
And the little minions doing most of the work get paid scraps. Anyways.
All right, can you hear the stream? Ooh, excuse me, give me a second. Let me get to the end of the video here. Looking at no, go to the end of the video, not where you left off. So I can hear it play. End of the video here. Looking at no, go to the end of the video, not where you left off.
Deep in out.
So I can hear it play. Okay, good enough. I don't know why StreamYard has such a problem with this. I did the correct procedure.
Alcoholism was when I was working a really crappy job, getting paid such little money to do the actual work at the degree mill. And yeah, it sucks. So I relate.
Mr. Wormhat, I personally have a hard time believing that even Kent Hovind's alma mater, Patriot Bible University, would have accepted you as a student.
Severely depressed and turned to alcohol when I was working. And
But in all honesty, I am sorry that you had problems with alcoholism, and if the story you are telling is true. This is not surprising, and a lot of people have different ways of dealing with work stress. Some of these mechanisms are healthy and some are not. I don't know if this story has to do with your apparent shift here. Maybe that's why you seem to be going on a more religious bent, but I do hope you're doing better than you were at that time.
and I quit my job. And I mean, it really was to the point I was getting paid so little that basically my entire paycheck was gone with childcare and rent. I I imagine that after bills and rent and childcare, I probably had nothing left over from my paycheck. So I said, "F this." I mean, thank God I have support.
Okay, if you don't mind, I'm going to speed this up because he is such a slow speaker. So we'll go to 1.125.
For my family, and that's another thing. It's like you can't, if you're my age or even around that, the chances of you being able to like own a house is ridiculous. Like I don't know anybody that owns a house that didn't get helped out by their parents. And
Well, I do know people that own a house, or at least their current house, that weren't helped out by their parents. But most of the people, at least their first house, does get bought through the help of either parents or grandparents.
my dad helps me out. I have no shame in saying that. But I'm not rich by any means. I have enough to get by, and I stay home and I homeschool, and so that's why this stuff just very much.
Okay, Mr. Wormhat, did you just say you homeschool? I am thinking the requirements for homeschool education in your state are fairly lax if they allow you to homeschool. I also don't believe you were an educator, but that's just based off of YouTube content.
I personally connect with all of this because, yeah, I was in education. My entire family was always in education. Anyways, here's the answer. How are the teachers coping? Antidepressants. Me too, my friend. I just switched mine. What are you on? I'm doing all right with Buspirone. I don't know. I don't know the names of some of these, but my mom just yesterday, like I've said this before, how my Bafo family, they're like walking pharmacies, and my sister's going through something right now. Just her really elderly dog is on the end, and my mom keeps pushing her. Ask the vet for Xanax. Like what? Something about.
And what is wrong with using medication if you're having a medical issue or a mental health issue? This is healthy. Using medications that are monitored and properly dosed is a valid way to deal with anxiety and depression. Sometimes people can get off these medications, and sometimes people's brain chemistry is such that they will need them for the rest of their lives. And there is nothing wrong with either of these scenarios.
About these people. They're so into popping a pill for their mental.
Hans, this is going to come up throughout this stream, but you badly need a statistics course. You need to understand that Reddit is not a representative sample, and you have what appears to be 4 different teachers out of how many teachers in the world in this thread. Oh, I also have to fulfill a promise to Titan because I promised to do it in the 128 subscriber stream, and I didn't. And yes, I just said scream and not stream. Welcome, Titan Uranus.
Anyways, Lexapro, anti-anxiety meds, live, laugh, Lexapro. I thought that was hilarious. Live, laugh, Lexapro. How am I coping? I spent 6 weeks in a hospital, if that gives you any indication as to how I'm coping. This person has to go back to school, otherwise they lose their insurance, take a pay cut. They claim that they do like their job.
Yes, most teachers do like their job.
So teachers, they do get, and I don't know, I never really felt this, but I never wanted to teach the young children. I wanted to teach it.
Okay, fine, you wanted to be a college teacher. I still find it hard to believe that you were ever a college teacher, but that's just me.
University, so I didn't have that complex of, oh, I'm changing lives, I'm saving lives. But what I have to say about that is,
What teacher has a complex that they're saving lives? Teachers do not believe they are saving lives. But yes, teachers can change lives. You're going to bring up something later, and I'm going to point out that even I don't remember my teachers, and not all teachers remember all of their students.
that's just like the golden lining of a pile of crap. It, if children just went to school to learn the basics, reading, writing, math, and then they went off and they explored the world and they tried to find out what interested them. Because so here's what my mind goes to. A lot of people are like, either they think of the instances, oh, I changed that person's life, or they remember back, oh, I had this teacher that inspired me and changed my life. It didn't have to be a teacher. Okay, that's yes, that teacher did end up inspiring, but if we didn't have this whole system where children are locked up and have no choice, then everybody.
I'm glad you think prisons and schools are the same thing. Now, to be fair, with all the security we have in schools, it has been feeling more and more like that. But no, a school is not a prison.
Would have inspirational stories, maybe from teachers, but probably not just from going out and meeting somebody and, oh, you know how to sew? Do you want to teach me how to sew? Do you get what I'm getting at? When people say, oh, but this teacher inspired me and changed my life, they would have been inspired and had their life changed by something else if they weren't locked up and not able to choose things and they were forcibly through this. And that's only the best.
Mr. Wormhat, the reason the education system is designed the way it is partly because it's trying to meet the needs of an older society that no longer exist. The second way it is the way it is because people need to have certain skills in order to function in this society. You have to go through elementary school and learn the basics. You get a little bit more, and you get to explore some of your career interest in middle school. And by the time you get to high school, you can branch out a little bit more. And if you go on to college, you can specialize in a specific field. For example, I'm a grad student studying computer science. My bachelor's was in computer science. And if you think there aren't teachers I've had, even at the college level, who have been inspiring, you are incorrect.
Best case scenario, 99 times out of 100, the teachers are forgettable or it's whatever, they were nice, but they're not changing your life or inspiring you in any ways. Where if you were just left to your own devices to go find out what or seek after what inspires you personally, we would have so many more stories, or you would have been a part of a guild or an apprentice of somebody and really had your skills taken to the next level.
I am glad you agree that we need a Star Trek society, but you're going to make some comments that suggest you don't want to work for it.
Instead of like, oh yeah, that one teacher I had that one time was so inspiring. A bunch of BS in my opinion, but I know some people really are inspired, and it's like my mom tries to bring up, oh yeah, that teacher, you love them so much, and I don't even remember them, and so I think that they're just coping, and they're looking back with rose tinted glasses, and they want to pretend that I wasn't forced to do stuff that I didn't want to do, that I had no choice in. And I mean, I just got into an argument with my mom not that long ago because she was trying to reality deny, talking about vaccines, and I just bring up the simple point of,
Oh, good, we have some COVID vaccine denial. I was hoping you would stay focused on reality for a second. I should have known better.
well, I could never consent to vaccines, and I don't want, like, now I'm pissed. I don't hold it against her because I know that she probably thinks she was doing the best choice, so I don't hold it against her, but I would much prefer to have never been given a vaccine, and I was never able to consent. Nobody ever wants to talk about this fact. Children cannot consent to getting a vaccine.
Hans, after being exposed to some of your videos, there are times when I wish you had not been given a vaccine either. However, that is a bit of my darker side showing, and I usually suppress that side. I also need to do something for a second here and end Discord because it is coming out. Give me a second while I close Discord because you guys don't need to hear that beeping.
They can't. And I'm an example of a person who I grew up and I said, I don't agree with that. And I would have preferred to never have that done to me. What are the people's answers to that? Children cannot consent. And then,
Well, Hans, my answer to that when people try to pull that crap on me is I ask them, Do you think I'd rather be an autistic adult or a long dead child? Think about it for a second.
So, but that's where I just say it's your children. You're gonna do what you're gonna do. I don't judge. I know that they think that they're doing the best thing, so I don't really judge them for that. But I just disagree, heavily disagree, and want to be able to choose for myself. School the same way. I feel blessed that I am able to homeschool, but it's another thing where children can't consent to that. Children can't consent to being forced to go to school, and I would have loved to be homeschooled and to be able to do my own thing. And
Hans, I think you are getting something confused here, where children can't legally consent. You are correct about that, to certain things that are harmful. Other things, however, we have parents consent to it. A good example of this is if you had my consent to ever go to the dentist as a child, I never would have gone. And yes, I've had some horrible experiences with the dentist because I have some underlying conditions where occasionally local anesthetics don't work on me. It's rare, but one of my lifelong fears is of dentists, even though I've gotten better about it as an adult. And the reason for this is because when I was 6, I went to a dental appointment where the Novocaine didn't work. I remember that. It's etched in my mind. And yes, I still have problems going to the dentist to this day. However, I also understand, after talking to my dad, and partly because of the condition itself, I had a crowded palate and a lot of those teeth had to come out. Now, if the condition had been diagnosed back then, maybe they would have used something other than Novocaine, because anesthetics in that family often don't work on people with this condition. I just happen to be lucky that usually they do work on me.
not be sent to indoctrination camp. And two of the smartest people I know in my life had unconventional upbringings, not in public school. And it's because I think that they were illuminated individuals there. I went to one of their weddings. There was the Masonic checkerboard dance floor, and these people, one of them like sailed across the world as his growing up. His childhood was any of those really obscure childhoods like that. I think that their parents are probably high up, Freemasonry, Baphomet, whatever. They know about the
High up Freemasonry Baphomet? Okay, I don't know a lot about Freemasonry, but I'm pretty sure they don't actually worship Baphomet.
system of deception, and so that's why they they don't put their children in the rat race. They go off and tell them about how the Earth's really flat. And
Hans, that is incorrect. And it's a silly thing to say, because the people higher up that we call the 1% or even the 10% try to put their children at the top of the rat race, not enter them.
how history is a bunch of BS, and we're living in the ruins of previous nations that were better.
We're living in the ruins of previous nations that were better. What were those nations, Hans? Are we talking about the Roman Empire? Or are we talking about the mud flood? Because I'm pretty sure you believe in that.
Than us and all that stuff. Anyways, what a ramble video. Are the teachers okay? No, they're not, and the system's not okay. And if anybody has good,
The thing is, Hans, you could be teaching on some real things, touching on rather, that actually do affect teachers. One of the common problems with teachers is burnout because of low pay, long work hours, and of course, as they're pointing out here, administrative hurdles that are often put in place by legislatures, usually put in place by people who aren't educators and aren't on the ground. This is not something that is unique to education. If you've ever worked in a corporate environment or a retail environment, you'll notice that the executives will come up with things to make money without thinking about whether or not what they come up with is something that's going to annoy their customers. A good example of this is Spectrum currently sending people into Walmart all the time to ask if I want to buy Spectrum service. I don't want to be bothered by Spectrum at Walmart. I already use them as my cable internet, and I subscribe to their cable streaming services. I don't want to be bothered while picking up my groceries or some other supplies that I need. Someone should have said, let's just not do this.
guess one thing I wanted to say is that for every inspiring teacher, you're going to have 5 horrible ones that are you have bad memories. And
The truth is, every teacher will be inspiring to someone, and you'll have a lot of teachers you probably won't remember, especially if you go through a school system like the way the US is set up, where you might have one teacher in the first couple of grades, a little more in the late elementary school grades, like at least 8 per day in middle school and high school. And then when it comes to colleges, it depends on the colleges. At my particular college, I tend to deal with the same professors over and over again because there are only so many computer science professors who work there. Now, if it were one of the larger departments, I might have one professor who I would never see again after that class. Yes, I do wonder exactly what his teachers have to say about him now.
and that traumatized you. And for every person that, oh, I love school, I made all my friends and all of this stuff, you're going to have 5 people out there that were totally traumatized by school and bullied relentlessly. And so it's people only pick the positive things, and they won't even ask the question of, well, what about letting people choose whether to be a part of this or not?
Because they are children, and children cannot choose whether or not something is good for them very well yet. It takes a little bit more maturity for people to be able to decide, hey, I should go to the dentist because going to the dentist or the doctor prevents bigger problems later on.
It's forced, mandated. You must be a part of this thing. You're an outcast if you're not a part of this thing. Total smear campaigns against anybody that doesn't want to do that. And notice how the upper crusts,
I don't know anyone who smears any child who doesn't want to go to school. In fact, I'm pretty sure most people understand that most children don't want to go to school because we've been children, Hans. A lot of us hated school. And you're not the only person who was bullied during your school experience. It's not uncommon.
always have like a way out of it. They always have a way of not putting their children in the rat race, but still kind of being a part of the system, but like on an elevated level. That's where private schools come in, the rich people that send their children
Can I go back to covering how 1 times 1 doesn't equal 2?
off to these fancy boarding schools and all that. I'm sure behind closed doors, certain of them are being taught things. Anyways, what a rant.
Oh my gosh, you mean people are being taught things in schools? What are next? Specific subjects? Like reading, writing, arithmetic?
Of a video. Meds. I'm on meds. How many teachers are on anti-anxiety type meds? Oh man, the schools got hit hard with this most recent PSYOP. The schools were heavily
PSYOP? What PSYOP? Oh, you think COVID was a PSYOP? Okay.
involved with that. Forcing children to wear masks to school is one of the most dystopian things I can think of.
Forcing children to wear masks to schools is one of the most dystopian things you can think of. Really, I can think of at least 5 more dystopian things that have been done in the last year that are worse than wearing masks. If you don't believe me, ask your local school librarian.
Thank God that my oldest was going into kindergarten around that time. And so I think that made it really easy to convince my wife, we are not sending our children to school in a mask. We're doing homeschool. And yeah, I might do more.
And in all honesty, if it weren't you, I would say, good for you. A lot of people did homeschooling during COVID. And people who point out that children lost learning during the COVID pandemic were correct. People and tried to counteract the loss of learning by teaching their kids. But Hans, what you don't seem to understand is that teaching is a skill and it's a profession. Not everyone is cut out to be a teacher. People go to school to be teachers for a reason. What you don't seem to understand is what the difference between professional content knowledge and pedagogical content knowledge is. And if you don't know what pedagogy is, it's just a fancy word that means the theory of teaching. Pedagogical content knowledge, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, and I'm not sure I am, is the content knowledge you need to teach a subject. Just because I know computer science doesn't mean I know how to teach it. And Having going through a couple of courses lately, I do have something to say that there's not a lot of computer science pedagogical content knowledge out there because computer science is a fairly new discipline.
More homeschool videos or talking about this, just because, I mean, this is my life. This is what my life has been for the past few years. Is I've just
Rambling on the internet, yes, Hans, we know.
been a homeschool dad, and I highly, if you're able to do it, it is such a blessing. And schools are absolute dumpster fires at this point. It's not even the same. And I meet
Hans, I would really like to know what you're teaching your children. I would like to know what the requirements in your state are. You're going to keep bringing this up, and I have to wonder, why would any state that has standards let you teach anybody? Oh, maybe I just answered my own question.
I meet so many people these days that homeschool. It's crazy. And just like going back to the Central Coast of California, my wife was bumping into people or meeting up with people. We were just meeting up with somebody, and this person works in education. It's hilarious how often this happens. One of my wife's old friends works in education. She stopped working and is now homeschooling her children. What do you know? I used to work in education.
And what we have here is an example of confirmation bias. If Hans is telling us a true story, if Hans did work in education as a adjunct professor, as he suggested earlier, he would notice more people who work in education. If he is a teacher, he's going to run into a lot of teachers, and after he quits being a teacher, he's going to notice the teachers he runs into more, simply because he's already primed to recognize them. It's like when you buy a new car and you start noticing all the other cars of that type around, unless, of course, that car is a Dodge Grand Caravan or a Chrysler Town and Country, because those things, even when I don't own one, seem to be everywhere.
I stopped homeschooling children, meeting other people that worked in education that stop and start homeschooling their children. Kind of interesting. I really liked this comment. There was a positive one. I always like to look for positive. If it's like a negative, always look for both sides of the coin, because sometimes you get even more data out of that. Looking for, here's an example of that. So let's find a counter example. Somebody who loves their job in education.
Oh.
I'm doing fine. Thanks for asking.
I muted the wrong person there. No, Hans, what you get is another anecdote. Anecdotes can be part of data, but an anecdote itself is not data. You need to find a way to get a valid random sample if you want to do a statistical analysis. Reddit is not the place to do that, and what you will find when you come to threads like this is people are just going to complain because that's what this thread is for.
Asking, starting year 14 a few months, and by the grace of God, already I noticed something very different. Somebody who's having a positive teaching experience immediately is bringing up God and is thankful.
Yes, because God is the reason someone might have a positive teaching experience. Okay, maybe if they're religious, that's true.
By the grace of God, saying that this is God is doing the work here. Probably they understand that their situation is not the norm, which is why they're.
I really wish God would do some of my work. It would make things easier.
Bringing God up right at the beginning. How interesting. All these other people talking about, no, it's going horribly, I'm on antidepressants. The first thing where I saw somebody's having a good time, actually, this was the second time, so we'll get to the other one.
Wait, could you, I don't know, and I'm guilty of this myself, at least script this if this wasn't a live stream? There's no indication that this was a live stream.
They're talking about God. Interesting. It's a rural school, great kids, coworkers. The system is sickened, but in my experience overall, job satisfaction comes down to the school culture. So a godly school culture is more positive.
How are you getting that from what they said? Just because someone invoked God doesn't mean it's a godly school culture. It may be that they worked in a religious school, or it may just be a religious teacher. Unsurprisingly, Mr. Wormhat, there are plenty of teachers who work in public schools who have religious beliefs. It's just that their religious beliefs are not relevant to what they do at the school, even though students, and this is the point I think you're going to miss later, are allowed to discuss religion amongst themselves. Teachers cannot show any favoritism towards any religion, which is why it's typically not brought up by teachers.
State just make teaching the Bible mandatory. I think that's so cool. And I love that it's going to
No, I don't think any state should make teaching the Bible mandatory. And I think you'll find a lot of states do cover the Bible as literature because it is important literature to our culture.
Just rage a bunch of liberals, but I think that that's government in action in a positive way. I think that's cool. I've talked about that a lot, how
Thank you for sharing your political beliefs with us, Mr. Wormhat. I wish I could say I'm surprised, but I've chosen to reject any political belief you might hold at this time.
how going through the education system, to me, it was clear that no, it's not that we can't talk about religion. It's that we can't talk about Christianity. And that was very clear to me going through school, because
Yes, as a teacher, I'm not allowed to talk about any religion unless it's somehow related to the course. That is the rule for all teachers all over. This is why Oklahoma's First Amendment ban, Bible law is going to be overturned if we have a sensible Supreme Court, which we don't, as well as Louisiana's requirements to put the Ten Commandments in the classroom.
we talk about all sorts of ancient Greek, lowercase g, God type stuff. We would talk about Islam things, and I'm sure that that got ramped to 11 after me. So
Why would that get ramped to 11 after you? Is there a story you want to tell us, Hans? But please, go on to more irrelevant rambling, and don't tell us that fascinating story that we all now want to know.
it wasn't about, oh, you can't talk about religion. No, it was all about no Christianity in school. It had to be an outside club after school activity to be Christian aligned. And anyways, dozens of us. I teach at a pretty positive rural school too. Rarely any fights. Truancy is our biggest problem. Truancy, that's just a problem for funding for them. They need butts in the seats at school.
No, Mr. Wormhat, that's not just a problem of funding. Students actually do not do as well if they do not attend school. And truancy rates also have a positive correlation to dropout rates in the later grades. Students who are more often truant from school are less likely to actually graduate.
Schools. It's all about getting the children there and locked away, and away from the family, and not living life. It's so cool to me going out with children when they're not supposed to be. So you turn a lot of heads when it's it's school season, school's in, it's the fall, whatever. You're out on a Tuesday in the middle of the day. You can go bowling whenever you want to, and you get the place to yourself, or maybe it's full of old people. Old people love seeing children. It's like they don't see enough children these days.
I'm glad you've included this very relevant story. Please go on.
And you can light up a whole room just walking in there with your children. And it's interesting that society is broken up like that. Children, what is the Arrested Development thing, seen but not heard? It's like we push the children in these little cages, and they don't get to be a part of society. Coping, I'm quitting. So here was another example of somebody who seemed okay. This was more of a neutral response. The one positive response I saw was somebody bringing up God instantly, living in a rural place.
Because you chose a place that would self-select people who are unhappy and more likely to complain. For heaven's sakes, this is Reddit. It's essentially an online forum. These are teachers complaining about problems they have. Have you ever complained about a job even if you like it? I guarantee you have.
Here's another person with a positive or a neutral experience, maybe. Make just over 100K, only work 186 days a year, come in at 7.
What teacher anywhere is making over 100K if they're not an administrator? I am also thinking, given the hours, this person likely, if they work anywhere, works at an elementary school.
7:30, leave by 2:40. Let the annoying roll off my back and love life. Yeah, I mean, that's the key to enjoying any job, I think, being able to separate it from your life. Clock in, clock out. You're playing what you got to do to get your rat race money because you're a wage slave. Okay.
Teachers do not go into teaching for money. If they go into teaching for money, they go into it for the wrong reason. And trust me, I see plenty of people in computer science classes who are there not because they love computer science, but because they think they're going to get a good career afterwards, or because their parent wants them to make money.
That I get, but that's not the norm. Making 100K as a teacher, it happens though. And they tell it. Oh, I don't know if I got later down. I think they said later that they worked in a more rich neighborhood. So it's like a rich getting richer situation. If you're upper middle class already, then maybe you could land a job.
Or hear me out on Hans Wormhat. Maybe, just maybe, the way we fund schools is through property taxes, and schools in more affluent neighborhoods can afford to pay teachers more because they collect more property taxes because the property values are higher.
In an area where teachers get paid good money. But this is the standard. Oh, just to show you how different it is across the US, I make 45,000, work 187. I worked for a university, and made less than this person. It was a joke.
Yes, adjunct professors, which you said you were, and I still don't believe, do not make very good money. Typically, the reason behind that is adjunct professors are supposed to have another job.
The education system is crumbling, which is hilarious because college costs so much more than it used to.
I can't imagine why the education system is crumbling when people like you are out there denigrating it every day and pushing for legislation to make things worse, Hans.
And I'll tell you where that money is going. Building ugly new buildings and breaking down old buildings. And some of these historical.
Hans, most buildings are funded, at least on universities, by donors who give the university money. There's a reason why university presidents go out and just try to get donors. It's their entire job. That is true even for state schools.
Reset type buildings. Filling.
And of course, sometimes those buildings are not very well built, as was the building where I took most of my computer science classes.
Filling the new shiny buildings with technology that might get used once or twice a year, if it even functions.
Hans, how far do you think I'd go in my computer science classes if no money were spent on the technology necessary to teach computer science? Did you even think about that statement before you said it?
But I would I would walk into these rooms sometimes and I'd be like, there's more money in screens in this classroom than I make in like 5 years.
I have no problem believing that, however.
No joke. It's hard being a teacher, even hard being a teacher who's a parent. When you see behind the scenes, it's really depressing to keep sending your kid. Yeah. Well, I'm going to end with this. Well, I have a Bible quote.
If you're going to end with this, why is this video, I don't know, 12 minutes longer?
After this, but first, I just read this today on YouTube. My dad was something of a philosopher, and when I was a kid, he used to read me philosophies that he agreed with, like this one by Walt Whitman from his book Leaves of Grass.
Okay, I need to play this a little bit more, but he's going to say something that is very, very wrong, and I want to see if you can spot it. Put it in chat if you do spot it.
How many people is this like such a foreign concept? Having somebody in your life who's like reading you philosophy books, and like I don't want to say jealous, because I don't feel jealousy, but my dad was just always working, would never sit me down and read me a philosophy book about life. Like, this just seems so foreign to me, but one of those things where I feel like times past had a richer culture and smarter people, and a lot of it has to do with spending time with one another. And
Hans, if your current circle of friends is any indication, I can't imagine why you thought people were smarter in the past. I think you just stopped hanging around smarter people.
and how people used to spend a lot more time with one another, and we're so distracted these days and have to go off to our 9 to 5. And think of how back in the day when people would go on vacation, they would pack everything and go off for months together. What's nowadays? Quickly pack the night
When did anyone who isn't rich ever do anything like that, Hans?
before, you go fly somewhere.
I think you should read about the labor movements of the 19th century and do a reality check there, Mr. Wormhat.
You go spend 3 days there and then pack up and then go back. Like, it's just
Okay, apparently he's not getting into it that quickly, so I'm going to ask the people in chat something. Which philosophy is Walt Whitman known for?
so different.
And what seminal philosophy did his book, Leaves of Grass, introduce to the world?
And yeah, that I've never had somebody like put me under my wing and I'm just sharing this because I feel like a lot of people are going to relate that. And yeah, it's not like a jealous thing. Like it would be nice, and it does make me a little upset that nobody. But I don't feel like you can expect that in life. I guess I'm just more of a realist. Like you can't expect somebody to take the time out of their life to mentor you just because, I mean, they have their own life and their own stuff going on. But anyways, this is just when stuff like this happens, it's like so otherworldly to me that it's almost comical that there's like dads out there that sit their kid down and read philosophy to them. It just seems so
What dad sits down and reads their kids philosophy in the first place? You are not going to sit your 2-year-old down and read Plato to them.
foreign to me. Love the earth and sun and animals.
And listen, Hans, Walt Whitman was a poet, not a philosopher.
Despise riches, give alms to everyone that asks, stand up for the stupid and crazy. That's a cool one. Devote your income.
Is that why you like it, Hans? Because it says people should stand up for you?
And labor to others. Hate tyrants. Argue not concerning God. Have patience. See, some of these I'd like some more elaboration because I think that there's a lot of truth in here, and maybe
Hans, it's a book of poetry, not a philosophy book.
it'll relate to some people. Like the arguing not about God, I feel that in like Jesus is the most important thing. If you agree on that, that's cool, and you should at least be able to go and agree on that. And then than that, you should be able to say like, that's cool. Have your opinion. And
Now, why didn't I just do a stream where I was going through the data science project I have planned for the rest of the summer?
yeah, I get when it comes to God, like iron sharpens iron, and you probably don't want to be wishy-washy and mess around with, because sometimes people have, my point is, sometimes people have religious opinions that make me feel a little like I'm not comfortable with that. Like I don't personally think God is okay with that, but I just set it aside and God is the judge. It's not me. And you can't force your beliefs on other people. So I get where I think I agree with that sentiment. Argue not concerning God in that respect. If you're two good people who know each other, you know your limits and your iron sharpening iron, I think that's a separate scenario. It's not an argument. It's a discussion at that point. Anyways, have patience and indulgence toward the people. Take off your hat to nothing known or unknown, to any man or number of men. I don't know what that means, but I don't like people who wear hats indoors. I mean, not the people. When people are wearing hats indoors, it makes me feel uncomfortable. I don't know what it is. It's just a weird thing. I don't judge them, but it's just one of those things that make people go freely with powerful, uneducated persons, and with the young and with the mothers of families. Powerful, uneducated persons. It is interesting because that is kind of a meme, or at least something that we see happen a lot, where you'll find a very, very successful person and they'll tell you, oh yeah, I dropped out of high school and then I did this. And
Hans, I've said this before, but you badly need a statistics course. The people who drop out of high school and who are largely successful are what is known as outliers. Getting a college education does not guarantee you success in any field, but not having a college education will make things more difficult for you. There are ways you can get an equivalent of a college level education, but the fields have become specialized, and that is harder and harder to do. The problem in this country is ever since the Reagan administration, we've essentially had predatory student loan organizations. And that is why we have a lot of people on the tail end of Generation X and younger who are in lifelong debt. We have tried to fix this situation, but judges who had no business being in the cases in the first place decided to block it rather than throwing the cases out of court. And this was done purely for political reasons rather than any legal reasons.
and I feel like everybody's run into a handful of those types of people, and it just shows you that life's about what you do and what you do, who you know. It's not about what.
Do you know what I run into a lot more often? I run into a lot more often people who are high school dropouts who are working some of the worst jobs our society has to offer because they can't get anything else.
Whether you get a C minus or an A plus, in a class you took in
Hans, I'm also going to let everyone on a little secret. Your grades don't matter outside of school, generally. They matter inside of school, they matter when you try to get into another school, but once you are done with formal education, your grades no longer matter anymore.
junior high or even in high school. That stuff ultimately doesn't matter, and it's because the system is a trap. Moving on, read these leaves in the open air every season of every year of your life. Okay, I think this guy's a little full of himself. Re-examine all this. This was the reason that I wanted to read this, because I bring this up a lot, and I'll keep bringing it up. Show me a great, I don't like using the word great, show me a big philosopher out there who hasn't said something like this.
Well, I can think of one who lives in California, or did.
Re-examine. Re-examine all you have been told at school or church or in any book. Dismiss whatever insults your own soul, and your very flesh shall be a great poem. Okay, I'm not saying I agree with everything that this guy's saying, but it's just yet again another example where don't believe everything.
David Hoffman, filmmaker. And we all know filmmakers are great philosophers. Well, unless their name is ContraPoints or. Oh, great, I can't remember Philosophy Tube's name right now. It doesn't matter.
Everything that you're told. I like this one talking specifically about re-examine everything you've been told at school. What I find very suspicious about these types of people is they won't elaborate. Elaborate. If you're going to tell somebody something like that, what are the things that you learned in school that you re-examined and that you don't agree with? Why don't you tell us? And I feel like a lot of times these people are gatekeepers, and you see this like.
Also, I have a question. You say it's David Hoffman, filmmaker, at the end, but earlier it's attributed to Walt Whitman. Which one is it? Let's take a look and see if we can find out. So I'm going to mute myself while I let the video play in the background because I need to know who said this.
Like dad talking about philosophy to their son, very close, personal, behind closed doors. This is how the hidden knowledge is spread from dad to son, behind closed doors, reading philosophy. Oh, re-examining something in school. Yes, son, the ball earth is a bunch of bullshit.
Okay, it was indeed Walt Whitman who said this. And Mr. Wormhat, I had forgotten you were a flat earther, but quite frankly, there's another channel I follow called Maritime Horrors, who is a navigator on the Coast Guard, and on a video about a ship called the SS Eastland, which was a terrible tragedy in the Chicago River, I believe, he said something derogatory about flat earthers, and some of his subscribers took him to task for that. And of course, he did a post where he responded, where some of you said, I was a little negative towards Flat Earther, to which he said, good. I don't know any navigator who doesn't think Flat Earthers aren't absolute morons. Now, maybe that wasn't a nice way to say it, but there is too much in the world that depends on the Earth being an oblate spheroid to work correctly for the Earth to be flat. Not to mention, maybe at some point on this channel, I'll go through the math that shows how many people would have to be conspiring to keep knowledge of the Earth being flat for it to be an actual conspiracy theory.
It's cartoons for a reason. And I think that's oftentimes how this information gets passed down. Matthew chapter 23, verse 8 through 12.
Okay, I don't really care if he's going to read a Bible verse. And he's just going to read a couple of Bible verses. And, if he wants to go in this direction where he's becoming a more Christian channel, fine. At least it will be more reality based than some of his past content we've seen. But since we had it on the screen, I think it's time I look something up. And I'm going to share you my favorite scripture from the Doctrine and Covenants.
12. Be ye not called rabbi, and rabbi means teacher. And I think that is really interesting, examining Jewish people. They really do treat rabbis like these all-knowing teacher figures that will bestow all sorts of knowledge on them. It's very interesting. I remember somebody I know that was Jewish, his dog was dying, which is kind of I was just talking about that earlier. And he was asking his rabbi if dogs have souls and like what's going to happen to his dog after death. They really see rabbis as these people that they can go to with questions and they'll always have an answer. They're a wise guy, a rabbi. And it kind of puts into perspective all the Talmudic stuff. It's all these wise guys trying to out brainiac one another, and but connected with God, trying to be the best interpreters of spiritual things and coming from a place of authority, alleged authority. And that's why I love these verses here. Everybody's on the same playing field, in my opinion, and
I did not realize I was muted. My mistake. So now let us share the verse. So, as I was saying, the historical context of this verse is that Joseph Smith was basically not happy with Joseph because Emma had caught Joseph cheating with the help. And as part of this long Doctrine and Covenants section, it's Doctrine and Covenants section 132. If you want to read the entire thing, it's in the Mormon version of the Doctrine and Covenants, but not the Community of Christ version because they don't accept this. You will find that he is telling Emma to accept polygamy or be destroyed. So, I'm trying to find the exact verse and I cannot find it. So let's go back to searching for destroyed and see if I can find it. Ah, here we are. It's section 132, verse 54. And I command mine handmaid, Emma Smith, to abide and cleave unto my servant Joseph, and to none else. But if she will not abide this commandment, she shall be destroyed, saith the Lord. For I am the Lord thy God, and will destroy her if she abide not in my law. So, basically, if you catch the Mormon prophet cheating with the help, he is going to introduce the doctrine of plural marriage, which is what happens historically here. And then, speaking for God, he's going to tell you that if you do not accept plural marriage, which he is trying to force upon you, you will be destroyed. Now, I happen to have a feeling this is the reason why Emma Smith did not go with Brigham Young to Utah and she stayed in Nauvoo, Illinois after Joseph Smith's assassination at the hands of an angry mob. But at least I find that verse far more entertaining than whatever Hans Wormhat is quoting here. All right, these streams go for about an hour and we're almost at the end of it. I would like to thank everyone for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Now go out and write some code.